Let's take you to Zimbabwe now, where tensions are brewing between the ruling ZANU-PF and the opposition MDC Alliance. That's amid efforts to push political reforms in their country. The political crisis and a failed economy has seen some frustrated Zimbabweans taking to the streets, demanding change. Scores of protesters were arrested. Among them was MDC Alliance Spokesperson Fadzayi Mahere, who has now been released. Now, in his address to the nation this week, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa issued a stern warning to his detractors, saying the so-called rotten apples will be flushed out. Let's take a listen.
We will overcome attempts at destabilization of our society by a few rogue Zimbabweans acting in league with foreign detractors. The bad apples that have attempted to divide our people and to weaken our systems will be flushed out.
Now, it's not clear who these so-called rotten apples are. It's also not clear who the rogue citizens are that are allegedly colluding with outside forces. But let's unpack the story now. We're joined via our Zoom line by the MDC Alliance National Spokesperson, Fadzayi Mahere. Fadzayi, it's great to see you. Great to see that you have been released now. Take us through what you've been through over the past few days and weeks.
Oh, over the last few weeks, as you know, the government has clamped down severely on citizens who are protesting against the shrinking democratic space, protesting against the failed economy, protesting against the hunger crisis, protesting against the collapsed public health system. Zimbabwe is a nation that's in crisis, and the citizens are fed up. And the citizens have come together to raise their voice and say, we are sick and tired of this. The government simply has to address this crisis instead of mounting excuse upon excuse for their bad governance, for their corruption, for their looting, for the poverty, and for the injustice that we continue to see every single day. And this culminated in the planned protest of the 31st of July. And instead of addressing the citizens' concerns, what we see is the government actually, using the COVID-19 lockdown to impose a completely unprecedented curfew, an unprecedented military-style lockdown, which is completely disproportionate to the COVID-19 crisis that we see. It's indefinite. It's not, it's not even tied to any sort of public health measures as you'd expect if it was, bona fide or sincerely about addressing the public health concern. And also, it's tied to, these completely arbitrary arrests and abductions. And, we are deeply concerned as citizens, as the political opposition, as civic society. Every progressive Zimbabwean looks at the crisis in Zimbabwe and says, what is the government doing? And you see the president, or we say president, but, we continue to contest his legitimacy. He takes the stand and we expect him to come with solutions. We expect him to deliver some sort of inspiration. And the first thing he says is that he's going to flush out opponents. He calls citizens with legitimate concerns rogue. He calls them dark forces. He calls them terrorists. This reaffirms what we've been saying day in and day out, that this is a government that is bankrupt. They simply have no plan to address the national crisis. And if you look at the cells that we were detained in, they are completely inadequate. The cells, the prison conditions themselves are a crime against humanity. How in the midst of a global pandemic like coronavirus do you have cells without running water? Cells that are infested with urine, cells that don't have functioning toilets, that don't have soap, that don't have sanitizer, that don't have masks, that don't have sanitary ware disposal facilities. It's a complete disgrace and a complete slap in the face to the dignity of Zimbabwe.
Fadzayi, you've summed up the crisis in Zimbabwe so eloquently, and you've talked about this shrinking democratic space in your country. How, amid that shrinking democratic space, do you and other citizens, other protesters, other journalists, other activists call for change in Zimbabwe when the space to do so is shrinking and there is a very real threat to your personal safety?
Well, what I have to emphasize is that the space has, I won't even say it's shrinking, we have to say it's shrunk. As you know, Hopo Chingono, a renowned international journalist, is in jail for unearthing corruption. Reporting on corruption should be something that is completely normal and acceptable in a constitutional democracy. You've got Jacob Ngarivume, who is a political leader and activist who simply called for protest. The right to peaceful assembly, the right to protest peacefully should be acceptable in a constitutional democracy. Several activists, you've got renowned international author Tsitsidanga Rembga, who is, a Booker Prize, she's on the Booker Prize long list. I mean, she's renowned for her book, Nervous Conditions. Her recent book, This Mournable Body Again. She's completely respected. These are renowned, respectable, reasonable people who are saying that the situation is dire. These people have all been in jail for simply saying that the situation in Zimbabwe is desperate. Those people have been incarcerated. The situation, the response by the government is to jail these people. If you look at, conditions in Zimbabwe right now, the police and soldiers, I have to emphasize that the military is involved, and soldiers are everywhere. You walk around neighborhoods in Zimbabwe, there are soldiers. You are tailed by, state agents at every turn. Young people are living like rats in their homes. They get abducted at every turn. Just yesterday, a cabinet minister said that they are going to criminalize decampaigning your country, meaning that just the very fact of speaking out is going to be a crime. However, what we say as progressive Zimbabweans, people who demand and desire a better society, we're not going to stop. It should never be wrong to demand better for your society. It should never be a wrong thing to demand that the hunger crisis end. It's no secret that 7.7 million Zimbabweans are food insecure. It's no secret that inflation in Zimbabwe is at 786%. It's no secret that most Zimbabweans currently, unemployment statistics are at over 90%. And it must be emphasized that currently the informal sector is locked down. No safety nets are in place whatsoever. The government has completely, destroyed the informal sector. They've told them that you cannot go to work. Soldiers have been put in place to barricade the informal sector from coming to work. And what does the government do? It says, we're going to give you 300 Zimbabwe dollars to selected, and by selected we mean ZANU-PF households. 300 Zimbabwe dollars is the equivalent of $3 a month. Now, $3 can barely buy you a cup of coffee. That's the state of affairs in Zimbabwe right now. And this is for, a country where, like I said, 7.7 million Zimbabweans are facing starvation. This is according to the UN. And what they described is that this hunger crisis is a hunger crisis that's man-made. 3.5 billion was lost to command agriculture. Corruption was completely looted in 2018. This is where we are as a country, and when we stand up and protest and say, no, you cannot continue to loot, they put us in jail. It's no secret that in the middle of the global pandemic, in the middle of COVID-19, instead of making PPE available for nurses and doctors, instead of making COVID-19 supplies available, they started dishing out contracts to the sum of 60 million to each other, including those, sons of the president and the president himself. Absolutely unacceptable. Nurses and doctors are currently on strike as we speak. What is the reaction of the Presidium? Instead of looking at the most, competent expert to lead the Ministry of Health, they take the Vice President. It's no secret that the Vice President himself has been seeking health care in China. He's always on leave. That's no secret. He came to South Africa. He went to China. He's always airlifted. He doesn't take health care in Zimbabwe. We know he's not a medical doctor. He's unqualified to take that role. Where most reasonable countries are looking for their most qualified public health specialists to lead them through this crisis, we look for a military man. This is not the time to play military-style politics with your citizens. It's the time to look for expertise, and Zimbabwe is not short of public health specialists to lead in this crisis. But if you've got a government that's consistently declaring war at its citizens, this is exactly the result. A government that pays no heed to its constitution. At the moment, we know that the government has said that, look, they want to decimate the constitution. Instead of aligning laws to the constitution, they've laid out over 27 proposed amendments to the constitution. They don't have any respect whatsoever for the rule of law. They have no respect for basic human rights. They've got no respect whatsoever for the basic socio-economic rights of citizens. They arbitrarily closed the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. They've got no respect whatsoever for property rights. They've got no respect whatsoever for the right to privacy. They wake up one day and say that all the financial records and public service records belonging to the biggest mobile network should be taken by the police. That's completely unacceptable. We cannot live in a military state. That's what we are saying, not just as the main opposition, the MDC Alliance, but it's a call that every single progressive citizen is making. You cannot, as a government, as a regime, make every single citizen live in fear. You cannot cripple the citizens by fear.
Fadzayi, it's so difficult to do a follow-up question to everything that you've just outlined there, but what is the next step now for Zimbabwe? You talk about a citizenry that is demanding, that desires change in their country. They deserve this change as well. Where to from here, not only for the MDC Alliance, but the international community as well, South Africa included, and the pressure that should come for real reform in Zimbabwe?
Thank you for raising that. As I've laid out, Zimbabwean citizens are doing every single thing that they can. I think the call is often made that, what are Zimbabweans doing? When a gun is pointed to your face and you stand up and hold the placard anyway, you are doing the most. So I think the call that we make is that, the region needs to step up. It's no secret that the MDC trio, three members of the MDC Alliance were protesting against hunger, and the response of the regime was to abduct, torture, and sexually assault them. When grave injustices, crimes against humanity, deep human rights violations of that nature take place, we expect the region and the continent to take a stand.
Absolutely.
When Zimbabwe is basically, in a de facto state of emergency, when you've got armed soldiers storming shopping centers because citizens are holding up placards that say "Save the babies," we expect the region to take a stand. President Cyril Ramaphosa is currently, AU chair. The AU has said that this is the year of silencing the gun. You've got Zimbabwe effectively turned into a de facto military state. We've got a curfew. This is something that last happened under Ian Smith during colonial times. Are we sincere about this being the year of silencing the gun? It's happened time and time again when citizens rise up and, military cannons are just driven arbitrarily through the street and Zimbabweans are killed. It's time for the region to take a stand and say that, it's unacceptable that Zimbabweans are just killed and abducted. Abductions are taking place every single day in Zimbabwe. How many Zimbabweans need to be tortured before the region says this is unacceptable? Is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights that speaks of the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to dignity, is this a document that we take seriously, or is it just a meaningless piece of paper? The SADC Treaty on Human Rights, do we actually put page to these documents as Africans? Do we only care about black lives when we're being tortured by white people? Or do we care about repression even when it's black on black? We cared about, violations, crimes against humanity, when it was colonialism. There was such a big, important drive on Pan-Africanism there, but we really need to have a deep, introspective discussion about when black on black violence takes place. When a young woman is tortured and raped by a repressive African government just because she says we are hungry. We have to really introspect and ask ourselves, do Zimbabwean lives matter? And, there's something, I've worked at the War Crimes Tribunal for Rwanda. There's something about acting or starting to speak out when it's too late. There really is a danger as a region that we will act too late in the case of Zimbabwe. And I say this because 40 years ago, Mr. Mnangagwa was the Minister of State Security, just as the genocide was about to take place, the Gukurahundi genocide. How many Zimbabweans would need to lose their lives before the region would take notice? When he speaks about flushing out opponents, flushing out bad apples, dark opponents, dark forces, terrorists, this man means that. Those are not just empty threats. These people have guns. Unless you're expecting the citizens of Zimbabwe to also take up guns and expect Zimbabwe to degenerate into a civil war, I'm sure we don't want that. Why not call the man to explain what's going on in Zimbabwe? Surely you can't expect a civil war to take place in Zimbabwe. Come on, guys. These are your neighbors. I thought we were brothers. These borders are completely artificial. Call the man to account. If this was ECOWAS, the region would have acted already. Why are you afraid of Mr. Mnangagwa? We are doing the most. We're standing up, even though it's difficult. We're being jailed every single day. We're being abducted. All we're asking for is some black-on-black solidarity. If you can stand in solidarity with George Floyd, who's many oceans away in South Africa, why can't you stand in solidarity with your own Zimbabwean brothers?
Fadzayi
So that's
Mahere.
all I want. From international solidarity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for speaking to us. A plea there from Fadzayi Mahere, who is the spokesperson for the opposition MDC Alliance in Zimbabwe, for what is a de facto state of emergency in that country, pleading for the neighbors of that country, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, pleading with the AU to step up to do something about it, to hold Emmerson Mnangagwa to account.